Today we have joining us Bapak Naik Hanokh Parmenas, the Parmenas law firm founder and Kalbis Institute rector. Good morning, Bapak Naik. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, good morning, Paul and Kai.
Morning.
How are you?
Thank you for joining us. We're doing great. So let's start off by perhaps can you give us a description? What is a prenuptial agreement and what does it cover?
All right, thank you so much for the questions, Paul. So prenuptial agreements is actually a written contract. It should be written. A written contract entered by the couple prior to a marriage or in the marriage period that enables them to take and control many of the legal rights they acquire when marrying and regulate the consequences of the marriage on their assets. If you are talking about the assets, it includes the potential of the assets. So we are not talking about the current assets, but the potential as well. So this prenup can regulate as well what happens to the couple assets when the marriage eventually ends by death or divorce.
Okay.
So so we were talking about. I told Paul, right, that there's a post-nup too, right?
Okay, I've never heard of this.
And so I did a research recently, and there is a post-nup as well. Can you tell us the difference between a prenup and a post-nup agreement? And also, when you're speaking of potential, right, does that regulate the rights and boundaries as well, other than assets? It's like or this is just solely for the protection of assets?
Yeah, actually, if you're talking about the assets, it's included potential of the assets. It's not only current assets, but in the marriage, the assets will be more and more, or maybe can be changing as well. So post-nuptial agreements enter into during a de facto relationship, de facto marriage, or after marriage, rather than before marriage. So by terminology, it can be defined as post-nup agreement is a nuptial agreement after marriage. So quite different from our previous marriage law, which regulated that the prenup shall be made before. But now, based on the court verdict number 69 in the year of 2015, then the prenup now also be made by the couple after marriage.
Okay.
The judge said that there's a phenomenon from the couples. They only have the conscience to make prenup after the marriage.
That makes sense.
Before. So for the marriage after 2015, then make the prenup.
Yeah, that would
Prenup.
make sense because having nobody wants to talk about a prenup
Yes.
before marriage. It's such an awkward thing
Yes.
to discuss. Like, hey, we're going to spend our lives together, but in case we don't, here's a contract I need you to sign. So let me ask you a little bit about. You mentioned potential assets. How is that calculated? You don't know yet how much assets you're going to make. So how do they calculate that to put in a contract?
We cannot calculate it now, but we have to put it in writing. So all potential assets, including the dividends of business that you can be own,
Okay.
or maybe the obligations that owed by a business owner.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, sorry, you were breaking up a little bit, but I just wanted to ask of the definition whether that would entail like agreements, for instance, like boundaries, as in the couple, party A is responsible to pay for this and this and this and this, or shall the couple, person A or person B require assets and it will become theirs in the long run or something like that. Is that the certain boundaries that happen? How would how would it be defined in the contract? I think that's more of the answer to the question that we're looking for. Is it like because we don't know what kind of assets we're going to acquire? At least is it because to protect each other's assets, or to make sure that if something happens that this will still come out with her assets and he will come out with his assets? Is that what is it about? What it is about?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, the agreement will be made. The wordings will be defined principally by us. So about the potential asset, yes, of course, we can define it right now. And even when you make the agreement, yeah, but actually, if you think you will get something from business A and business B, and you can put it in continuum. It's like that.
Okay, it seems a little bit, for me, again, we were talking before our discussion and we were trying to figure out, like, who is this most suitable for? In your professional opinion, is this something that all potential married couples should be discussing, or is it only for certain groups or certain people who need to worry about prenups?
Okay, so it's a hard question, but back into definitions, I mentioned before about prenup agreements, which is the divisions of property, divisions of assets. So the party who needs the most is who have the best assets. So the party who have the bigger assets, bigger benefits, should have to make prenuptial agreements. Because the key point of prenup actually protect assets. So who have the bigger assets, who want to protect the assets, who needs the most the prenuptial.
Yeah, I think this is brings it into a sensitive situation where somebody with larger assets say, hey, just in case we split up, I want to make sure that we're all coming out of this in a fair manner. Could be a little bit taken offensive by the spouse or the potential spouse here. So lastly, what are some of the most important things to consider when it comes to this? Like, what are some of the things to prioritize apart from assets? Is child support, for example, or custody all going to be outlined in the prenup as well?
Yes, of course. The custody can be put it in the agreement because based on the freedom of the contract principle, you can regulate anything in the not only for assets, but if I may suggest as my professional opinion, the main reason for many broken marital relationships is due to financial problems. If you not agree with me, that's professional experience. The main reason many broken marital relationship is due to the financial problem. So we have to prevent this problem from happening in the future. The idea is to include points to you in your finances about this. So first is about inheritance. That's in the marriage. Civil about the husband and wife in the marriage will to pay all the debts owed by. Number 3, the husband and wife can agree that couple only trust with single marriage. So that's the most important thing. The written.
Well, Panek, thank you so much for the discussion this morning. It certainly is an eye-opener because there were a lot of points that I think we really need to highlight and consider. And certainly the interesting part was what really needs to be considered to put into a prenuptial agreement or post-nup if it's necessary along the way of the marriage. Panek, thank you so much for your time. And we'll have hopefully a discussion on a different topic with you soon. Thank you.
Take care. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, the only, for me, still, to this day, I can imagine it would just be an awkward conversation to have. I mean, it's a great thing to keep protected, just like everything else, like you discussed throughout the marriage. Like more recently, as we started to have more kids, we've started to have to consider more things such as putting away investments for the future, life insurance, health insurance, and all those things. But prenup is rarely one that is being discussed, especially for Indonesians. Like we had this discussion before the show.
Yep.
Like it's such an unfamiliar thing for an Asian, not just Indonesian, but Asian culture to embrace like a prenuptial agreement. Because it's like you're planning for a divorce already.
Yeah.
Yet, right?
But I think it just really depends on, there are certain people who may need it. People certainly with like big inheritances, as mentioned by Naik before, family inheritance should be discussed.
Financial
And
responsibility.
financial responsibilities, because sometimes when something happens, you get dragged along the way when it comes to debt and everything. And that could, one recent phenomenon, one of the big reasons why post-nuptials, I read in an article, has been approved in Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, was because a lot of international marriage, multicultural marriages happened. And here in Indonesia, the asset management, it's before this is defined, Indonesia wants to make sure that the Indonesian party will be protected of its assets and will not be, if something happens along the way,
Right.
that they will receive protection. And I think that's why the prenup and postnup
Right.
mostly was agreed, because there was a lot of property cases in regards to international marriages and how they had to how they had to handle that and resolve that, and a lot of the Indonesian parties has been affected by that more negatively. So I guess I understand why.
Sure.
But it is true. Sometimes it's tough to talk about these things, right? It's awkward.
It's like an umbrella. You never really need it until it actually rains.
Yes.
Anyway, we're going to take a short break here on the program, but when we return, we're going to recap some of our earlier stories for you from around the world. Stay with us here on the C Morning Show.